For 12 years, Alex Mercer built a construction empire in Dubai, sending $85,000 back home every single month, never missing a transfer. He believed his younger siblings were managing everything, protecting his aging parents in the house where he grew up. But when Alex finally returned, unannounced, to surprise them with a fully paid retirement, the house was gone, razed. A new apartment complex stood in its place, and a neighbor revealed the truth: his brother had sold it nearly 3 years ago, pocketing every dollar. Alex Mercer was not a man who acted on impulse. He had left his small hometown with nothing but a work visa and a promise to return. While his younger brother and sister stayed behind, Alex poured himself into Dubai's unforgiving construction boom. He skipped meals, slept in site trailers, and built an empire from sheer refusal to fail. But his success was never for himself. It was for the two people he believed were safe in his absence: his mother and father. Now, standing on an empty lot where his childhood home once stood, he realized that the family he had been fighting for may have been the very ones who dismantled it. The dust from the construction site still swirled around Alex's shoes when a woman's voice cut through the noise. Mrs. Grady, who had lived 3 doors down since before Alex was born, was wiping soil from her hands with an old cloth. She stared at him like she was seeing a ghost. "Alex Mercer," she said, "I prayed you'd come back before it was too late." He took a step toward her, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Where are my parents?" Mrs. Grady's face darkened. She pointed toward the half-built apartment complex. "Your brother Ethan sold the house, came with papers, told the neighbors your mom and dad had agreed to move into a retirement village. Said it was all arranged, very official." She paused, her voice dropping. "But I saw them leave, Alex. They didn't go to any retirement village. They went in Ethan's car with one suitcase between them, and your father could barely walk." Alex felt the ground tilt. Ethan, his younger brother, who had always been the charming one, the one who promised to handle everything while Alex was abroad. Every month for 12 years, Alex had wired money into Ethan's account, never missing a single transfer. $5,000, sometimes more. For medicine, for property taxes, for their mother's heart condition. And Ethan had called him faithfully, always with the same reassurance. "Mom and Dad are fine, I gave it to them. Don't worry about anything, big brother." Now, standing on the empty lot, Alex realized those calls had been a carefully constructed performance. "Where are they now?" he asked, his voice harder than he intended. Mrs. Grady hesitated. "I'm not supposed to know this, but a few months ago I saw your mother at a laundromat across town. She was washing clothes, but she looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in years. I asked if she was okay, and she just smiled and said not to worry. But Alex," the old woman's eyes glistened, "she was wearing a sweater with holes in the sleeves. Your mother, who used to sew everyone else's clothes. I knew something was terribly wrong." Alex didn't wait for more. He got the address, climbed into his car, and drove through the town that had once been his entire world. The streets looked smaller now, faded as if time had been slowly erasing them. He passed the high school where he had played football, the church where his parents were married, the park where his father had taught him to ride a bike. Every landmark felt like an accusation. "Why didn't you come sooner?" The laundromat was a squat brick building wedged between a payday loan office and a boarded-up diner. The sign above the door was missing half its letters. Alex parked and stepped out, the thumping of washing machines vibrating through the walls. A narrow staircase led to a second floor, and at the top, a single door with a number scrawled on a piece of tape. He knocked. No answer. He tried the handle and the door swung open. The room was barely larger than a closet. A single window let in pale light, revealing a mattress on the floor, a hot plate on a folding table, and a stack of unpaid bills held together with a rubber band. In the corner, an old man sat in a wooden chair, wrapped in a thin blanket despite the afternoon heat. His breathing was shallow, his hands trembling. Beside him, a woman with silver hair and hollow cheeks was trying to spoon cold soup from a can. Alex's legs nearly gave out. "Mom? Dad?" The woman turned. For a long, terrible moment, she didn't recognize him. Then slowly, her hand rose to her mouth, and the spoon clattered to the floor. "Alex?" Her voice cracked. We thought you had forgotten us." The words landed like a physical blow. Forgotten. Alex had spent 12 years building a life precisely so they would never be forgotten. so his parents would never want for anything again. He crossed the tiny room in 2 strides and knelt beside his mother, taking her frail hands in his. They felt like paper, thin and dry. "I never forgot you," he said, his voice breaking. "I sent money every single month, Mom, to Ethan." At the mention of Ethan's name, his mother's face crumpled. She looked away toward the bare wall, as if the truth was too heavy to face directly. His father, Walter, let out a slow, rattling breath from the chair. He was barely the same man Alex remembered. Once broad-shouldered and strong, a mechanic who could lift an engine block alone, Walter now seemed hollowed out, his clothes hanging from a frame that had shrunk by decades. "We never saw that money," Walter said quietly. The words were simple, but they carried 12 years of silent suffering. Alex's mind raced. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app, and scrolled through the transfer history. The evidence was all there, wire after wire sent to Ethan Mercer's account, with memos reading, "For Mom's medication," "Property tax payment," "Dad's doctor visits." Over 144 transfers, totaling more than $85,000. Every single one marked delivered. "Ethan told us you were struggling," his mother whispered. "After the first year, he said your business wasn't doing well. He said you couldn't send as much anymore, but you were trying your best, and we believed him. He's our son." Alex felt a cold fury building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. There was more to uncover. He looked around the room. The mattress, the hot plate, the pile of overdue bills. A small pharmacy bag sat on the windowsill. He walked over and opened it. Inside were pill bottles, all nearly empty. One of them was for a heart condition. The prescription date was 2 months old, but the bottle was still half full because the pills had been cut in half. "He told us he was handling everything," Walter continued, his voice growing weaker. "He said if we questioned him, we were being ungrateful. He said you had abandoned us, and he was the only one who cared enough to stay. That's why we never called. We thought you didn't want to hear from us." Alex could barely process the cruelty. Ethan had not just stolen the money, he had systematically isolated their parents, feeding them lies while intercepting every lifeline Alex threw across the ocean. "And what about his sister?" He turned back to his mother. "Where's Chloe in all of this? She still lives in town, right?" His mother's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Chloe, she knew. She knew what Ethan was doing. At first, she tried to help us. She brought us groceries once a month. But then Ethan told her if she interfered, he would make sure she lost her job. He had connections at the real estate agency where she worked. He said he'd destroy her, so she stopped coming." The betrayal now had a second layer. His sister, cornered in silence, had been turned into an accomplice by fear. Alex realized the full picture. Ethan had built a prison of manipulation, using threats and false narratives to control everyone. But there was one more horrifying revelation yet to come. Alex asked about the house. The property had been in the family for 3 generations, paid off decades ago. How had Ethan sold it without their parents' knowledge? Walter's hands shook harder. "He said we were signing papers for a property tax exemption. I didn't read them. My eyes are so bad. And I trusted him." Alex felt his stomach drop. Forged signatures. That crossed a line from theft into criminal fraud. He took a deep breath, then asked the question he dreaded most. "When did he sell it?" His mother covered her face. "Almost 3 years ago. We've been here ever since. We didn't know who to call. We thought you were too poor to help, and we didn't want to be a burden." 3 years. 3 years in this room, above the noise of washing machines, while his brother drove a new car and took vacations on money meant for their survival. Alex stood up, his hands trembling with rage. But he also felt a surge of clarity. The lies were finally collapsible. He had records, dates, evidence, and he had the will to tear down the entire structure Ethan had built. "I'm going to find him," Alex said, his voice steady now, "and I'm going to get everything back. First, we're getting you out of here." He helped his father to his feet. The old man winced in pain, his joints stiff from malnutrition and untreated arthritis. As they moved toward the door, Alex noticed a small notebook on the table. He opened it. It was his mother's handwriting, a log of every bill she couldn't pay, every medication she had to skip, every day she went without eating so Walter could have a little more. The last entry was dated yesterday. Still no word from Alex. I pray he is safe. I wish I could see him one more time. Alex closed the notebook and put it in his pocket. That document wasn't just a record of suffering, it was evidence. He drove his parents to a hotel, the nicest one in town, and got them a suite with 2 beds and a warm meal. For the first time in years, his mother ate until she was full. His father fell asleep in a chair without a thin blanket, without the sound of dryers rumbling through the walls. But Alex didn't sleep. He sat in the lobby with his laptop and his phone, assembling a case. Every wire transfer confirmation, every bank statement, every message from Ethan claiming everything was fine. Then he called the county recorder's office and requested the deed transfer records for his parents' former property. The clerk found the file quickly. The sale had been processed 2 years and 11 months ago. The buyer was a development company. The signature on the seller's line was Walter Mercer. But when Alex compared it to the signature on an old birthday card his father had sent him years ago, the forgery was obvious. The W was too sharp, the pressure too even, an amateur attempt. But here's the pivot that changed everything. The development company's registered agent was a shell corporation owned indirectly by Ethan Mercer. He hadn't just sold the house, he had sold it to himself through a fake entity, then flipped the land to a developer at triple the price. The profit, nearly $400,000, had been laundered through a series of accounts before disappearing into a luxury condo in a nearby city, purchased in the name of Ethan's girlfriend. Alex sat back in his chair, his blood cold. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was a calculated real estate fraud scheme that had turned his parents' entire life's worth into personal profit. And if Ethan could do this, he had likely done it before, or would again. The next morning, Alex left his parents resting at the hotel and drove to the real estate agency where Chloe worked. He needed to know how deep this went and whether his sister could be turned from an accomplice into a witness. He found her at her desk, pale and nervous, her hands fidgeting with a pen. When she saw her older brother, she flinched. "Alex, she started, but he cut her off, his voice low and measured. "I know about the threats. I know Ethan made you stay silent. But I need you to tell me everything now. Everything you've seen, everything you signed, everything you suspected. Because if you help me, I can protect you. If you don't, I can't promise what happens next." Chloe's eyes welled up, but this time with relief, not fear. She had been waiting for someone to stand up to Ethan. And as she began to speak, the full scope of the conspiracy finally came into view. A web of forged documents, coerced signatures, and a trail of victims that extended beyond their own family. The story was about to get much bigger than one stolen house. Chloe led Alex to a small coffee shop 2 blocks from her office. She couldn't speak freely at work. Ethan had eyes everywhere. As they sat in a corner booth, she kept glancing at the door like a woman expecting to be caught. Her voice trembled as she began. "It started small," she said. 3 years ago, Ethan asked me to notarize some documents for him. He said it was just routine. Dad's property tax stuff. I didn't think anything of it. Then later, he came back with more papers. This time, he wanted me to witness a signature. He told me Dad was too sick to come in, so he had already signed it home. I didn't look too closely. I was afraid to." Alex leaned forward. "Did you actually see Dad sign?" Chloe's eyes filled with guilt. "No, but I stamped it anyway. I thought I was helping the family. I didn't know he was stealing the house until it was already gone. And by then, he had proof I notarized the documents. He said if anyone investigated, I'd lose my license and go to jail. He told me to keep quiet or he'd destroy me." So Chloe wasn't just a silenced bystander. She had been made an unwitting co-conspirator through forged notarizations. Alex felt a cold clarity. Ethan had planned this for years, ensnaring everyone in a web of legal traps that made it nearly impossible for them to come forward without incriminating themselves. But Chloe had more to reveal. She pulled out her phone and showed Alex a series of text messages from Ethan, dating back 2 years. They were threatening and manipulative, full of phrases like, "Don't forget who pays your salary," and "one word to the state board and you're finished." Then she scrolled further back, to messages from before the sale. Ethan had been grooming her for months, asking for small favors that slowly escalated. First a signature, then a notarization, then her silence. "I'm not the only one," Chloe whispered. "There's a woman named Diane, a retired school teacher. She lived next door to Mom and Dad for 20 years. Her house was fully paid. Ethan convinced her to sign it over to a family trust that would protect her from creditors. She trusted him because he'd helped her with small repairs. Now she's in a state-run assisted living facility with nothing. She calls me sometimes crying, asking why her house is gone. I can't even answer." Alex's jaw tightened. Ethan had preyed on the elderly, using his charm and fake expertise to strip them of their homes. The fraud was not just a family tragedy, it was a pattern of organized crime. Chloe gave Alex Diane's phone number, along with two other names, a veteran and a widow whose properties Ethan had allegedly targeted. "This is bigger than one crooked brother," Alex said. "He's running a real estate theft operation, and you're going to help me expose it, all of it. If you cooperate, I'll find a way to protect you. But I need everything." Chloe nodded, wiping her eyes. She was terrified, but for the first time, she also looked determined. She gave Alex copies of every document she still had: the forged transfer papers, the notarization records, the threatening texts. It was enough to open a criminal investigation, but Alex knew that evidence alone wouldn't bring justice. He needed to pressure Ethan into making a mistake. That evening, Alex drove to the development site where his childhood home once stood. Workers were pouring concrete for the foundation of the new apartment complex. A sign advertised luxury units coming soon, with a completion date only 2 months away. If the project finished, the legal battle to reclaim the land would become exponentially harder. Time was running out. He called his attorney, a woman named Catherine Wells, who specialized in elder financial abuse cases. She reviewed the documents overnight and called back at 7 the next morning with a stunning discovery. The shell company Ethan used to purchase the house, then flip it to the developer, had been dissolved 3 months ago, but not before the proceeds were transferred to a second shell company registered in a state known for lax financial disclosure laws. That company was linked to several other properties, all sold under suspicious circumstances involving elderly owners. "Your brother isn't some amateur con man," Catherine told him. "He's been doing this for years, and he's smart enough to cover his tracks with layers of fake corporations. But there's a weakness: the forged signatures. If we can get a handwriting expert to confirm the forgeries, and if we can tie Ethan directly to the bank accounts that received the sale proceeds, we can freeze his assets before he vanishes." Alex authorized Catherine to file an emergency injunction to halt construction on the property, alleging fraudulent transfer. He also hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar. Within 72 hours, they had a clear map: the $85,000 in missed family support payments, the $380,000 from the fraudulent land sale, and an additional $1.2 million Ethan had siphoned from other victims over 5 years. All of it flowed through a series of accounts, eventually funding a lavish lifestyle, luxury cars, vacations to Europe, and a $500,000 yacht registered to his girlfriend's name. But the most devastating revelation came from Diane, the retired school teacher. Alex visited her at the assisted living facility. She was a gentle woman in her late 70s, with bright eyes still sharp. She told him how Ethan had befriended her after she lost her husband, offering to help with bills and paperwork. "He was like a son to me," she said. "He told me I could stay in my house forever, but I needed to sign some trust documents for my own protection. I didn't understand them. I just trusted him. Then one day he said the trust had run out of money and I had to leave." The house sold for $450,000. Diane received nothing. She was on Medicaid now, surviving on government assistance, while Ethan drove a sports car. Alex recorded her statement on video, with her permission. It was heartbreaking, but it was also undeniable proof of predatory behavior. As the investigation deepened, something else emerged. Catherine discovered that Ethan had an accomplice, a disbarred lawyer named Ronald Phelps, who had drafted the fraudulent trust documents and served as the closing agent for several sales. Phelps had a history of disciplinary actions for similar misconduct, but had never been prosecuted because his victims were too ashamed or too intimidated to testify. Together, Ethan and Phelps had formed a parasitic partnership, targeting vulnerable seniors throughout the county. Alex now had a file thick enough to bring to the state attorney general, but he also wanted something more personal, to look Ethan in the eye and force him to acknowledge what he had done. Catherine warned against it, saying it could tip Ethan off and cause him to flee or destroy evidence. But Alex argued that a controlled confrontation, recorded with a hidden device, might get Ethan to incriminate himself on tape. Reluctantly, Catherine agreed, on the condition that law enforcement was briefed beforehand. A meeting was arranged at the family home. Not the old house, which was gone, but the hotel suite where Alex had put his parents. He told Ethan he wanted to discuss settling the estate and that he was willing to let bygones be bygones if Ethan cooperated. Ethan, ever confident, agreed to come. When Ethan walked into the suite, he saw his parents sitting together, looking healthier than they had in years. His smile flickered, but he recovered quickly. "Alex, it's good to see you," he said, extending his hand. Alex didn't take it. Instead, he gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Ethan. We need to talk about the money. All of it." Ethan's expression hardened. He knew the game was up, but he still tried to bluff. "I don't know what you're talking about. I took care of Mom and Dad the best I could. You were the one who disappeared for 12 years. Alex remained calm. He began reciting facts, dates, amounts, account numbers, the shell corporation, the forged signature, the victims' names. With each detail, Ethan's face grew paler. Then Alex mentioned Diane, the school teacher, and Ethan's mask finally cracked. "That old woman didn't know what she was signing," he snapped. "I did her a favor. I was going to take care of her too later." There it was, admission of intent, recorded on a small device in Alex's pocket. Alex stood up. "There won't be a later. I filed a criminal complaint with the state. Your accounts are being frozen as we speak, and everyone you've cheated is going to know exactly what you did." Ethan lunged forward, but two plainclothes detectives, who had been waiting in the adjoining room, stepped in and restrained him. The arrest was quiet, efficient. As Ethan was led away in handcuffs, he turned back one last time, his voice full of venom. "You think this is over? I'll be out in a month, and I'll come for everything you have." Alex didn't flinch. He had heard that threat before, in Michael's messages from the original story. The same arrogance, the same refusal to accept responsibility. But the difference was, this time the system was already in motion. The freeze orders were in place, the forensic trail was complete, and multiple victims were ready to testify. Yet the fight was far from over. The civil case to reclaim the property was still pending. The construction company, which had bought the land in good faith, was fighting the injunction. And Ethan's girlfriend, now a potential co-defendant, had hired her own high-powered attorney. Alex realized that the legal battle would drag on for months, maybe years, and would require every ounce of his remaining fortune and resolve. But as he looked at his parents, sitting together in a clean hotel room, with full bellies and hope in their eyes for the first time in years, he knew he could never walk away. The real work was just beginning. The criminal case moved faster than anyone expected. Ethan Mercer was denied bail, deemed a flight risk. He sat in a county jail cell while his carefully constructed world collapsed. The forensic accountant's report had been devastating. Over $1.7 million traced across 17 shell accounts, all linked to elderly victims who had trusted him. Ronald Phelps, the disbarred lawyer, was arrested 3 days later at a golf course, still carrying a briefcase filled with blank trust documents. One by one, the victims came forward. Diane, the retired school teacher, was the first. Her video testimony, recorded in the assisted living facility, was played before a grand jury. She spoke plainly without self-pity, describing how Ethan had smiled when he handed her the pen, how he had called her Aunt Diane and promised she'd never have to worry again. Several jurors wept. When the grand jury returned an indictment on 18 counts of elder fraud, forgery, and grand theft, Ethan's attorney began floating plea deals. But the prosecutor, a woman named Angela Cruz, refused. She had seen the photographs of Walter and Helen Mercer in that single room above the laundromat. She wasn't going to let Ethan walk away with a suspended sentence. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Alex testified for 2 days, presenting bank records, the forged deed, and the secretly recorded confession. Chloe, granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation, testified about the notarizations and threats. Her voice shook, but she never looked away from her brother in the defendant's chair. Then came the handwriting expert, who demonstrated exactly how the W in Walter's signature had been traced from an old birthday card. The forgery was so clumsy, the expert called it almost insulting. Ethan took the stand in his own defense, a catastrophic mistake. Under cross-examination, he grew arrogant, then defensive, then openly hostile. When Angela Cruz asked him about the pawned heirlooms and the stolen dignity of his parents, he snapped, "They were old. They didn't need that stuff anymore." The courtroom fell silent. Walter, sitting in the gallery, closed his eyes. Helen held his hand but did not cry. She had cried enough. That single sentence, more than any financial evidence, sealed Ethan's fate. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Ethan to 22 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15. Ronald Phelps received 12 years and was ordered to surrender his remaining assets for restitution. The courtroom erupted in quiet, tearful applause from the victims' families. Alex watched his brother being led away in chains, and the only feeling he could name was exhaustion. There was no joy in a family destroyed, only the grim satisfaction of justice served. But the civil case was still grinding forward. The development company, which had bought the land in good faith, initially fought the injunction. They had sunk nearly $2 million into the apartment project and stood to lose everything if the sale was reversed. Catherine Wells, Alex's attorney, proposed a creative solution. The developer could keep the land, but they would pay fair market value directly to Walter and Helen, the amount Ethan should have given them, plus damages. The developer, eager to avoid years of litigation, agreed. A settlement was reached, $470,000, enough to buy a new home and fund the parents' care for the rest of their lives. The construction continued, but the Mercers were made whole. Alex used a portion of his own savings to purchase a small, single-story house in a quiet neighborhood 2 towns away. It had wide doorways for his father's wheelchair, a sunny kitchen where his mother could cook again, and a garden with roses that reminded her of the one she had lost. On the day they moved in, Helen walked from room to room, touching the walls as if she couldn't believe they were real. Walter sat in a recliner by the window, the same kind Daniel had ordered for his father, and for the first time in years, he picked up a newspaper and read it without trembling. Chloe, freed from the threat of prosecution and the weight of her silence, began attending therapy. She and Alex slowly rebuilt their relationship, bonded by the shared trauma of their brother's betrayal. She left the real estate agency and started working for a nonprofit that helped elderly homeowners protect themselves from fraud. Diane, the school teacher, received a settlement that covered her assisted living costs for the next decade. She wrote Alex a letter thanking him for believing her. "Most people don't want to hear old women's stories," she wrote. "You listened. That made all the difference." But the story wasn't quite finished. After Ethan's conviction, the state finally released his personal effects to the family: a box of clothes, a laptop, and a small safe deposit box key. Alex drove to the bank and, with a court order, opened the box. Inside, he expected cash or documents. Instead, he found a small velvet pouch. He opened it, and his breath caught. Inside was his mother's wedding ring, the simple gold band his father had bought 45 years ago, with a tiny diamond that Walter had saved 2 years to afford. Ethan hadn't sold it. He had kept it, hidden away, perhaps as a final trophy. Alex brought the ring back to the new house that evening. Helen was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, planting marigolds. He knelt beside her and opened his hand. She saw the ring, and for a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then she took it, slid it onto her finger where it belonged, and looked at her son with tears streaming down her face. "I thought I'd never see it again," she whispered. "He took it the day we left the house. He said it would be safer with him." Walter came to the door leaning on his cane. He saw the ring on Helen's finger, and his eyes, still sharp despite everything, filled with quiet joy. He didn't say a word. He just nodded at Alex, a father's silent gratitude that said more than any speech could. That night, the three of them ate dinner together at a table that wasn't covered in bills. The refrigerator was full. The medicine was whole. And for the first time in over a decade, no one was lying to them. Alex looked at his parents, and he understood that the fortune he had built in Dubai was never the real wealth. The real wealth was this: the chance to restore what had been stolen. Not just money, but trust, dignity, and a family's future. He had returned home to give his parents a retirement. Instead, he gave them back their lives. And here's the hard truth Alex discovered. Love and distance are not enemies, but unchecked trust in the wrong hands can turn a family into a battlefield. For 12 years, Alex believed he was protecting his parents by sending money. What he failed to see was that money without presence can be hijacked, and silence can be twisted into a weapon. His brother Ethan didn't just steal funds. He stole years. He stole dignity. He stole the simple peace of a mother wearing her wedding ring and a father reading by the window. But this story isn't just about betrayal. It's about the quiet resilience of parents who suffered in silence, the courage of a sister who finally spoke, and the brutal, beautiful journey of a son who refused to walk away after the damage was done. Not every broken family can be repaired with a courtroom victory. The real restoration happened in that garden, with marigolds in the dirt and a gold band returning to the hand where it belonged. So we leave you with this question. If you were Alex, would you have returned at all? Would you have forgiven Ethan once the truth was out? Or would you have let the system crush him without mercy? And more importantly, how often do we assume that the people we love are fine, simply because no one tells us otherwise? If this story moved you, let us know your answer in the comments. And if you believe that parents deserve more than forgotten promises, subscribe and join us for more stories that reveal the real price of silence. Sometimes the greatest fortune isn't built abroad, it's rebuilt at home.